For 3 agonizing days, the small blue sandbox in Davis Hale's yard served as a chilling crime scene, a hollow testament to the moment his 3-year-old son, Owen, vanished. The frantic search was yielding nothing but exhaustion and dead ends, leaving Davis in a waking nightmare of grief and unanswered questions. But this morning, a call from his new neighbor shattered the agonizing silence. Her beagle, a notorious digger, had unearthed something by the fence line. A dirt-caked stuffed giraffe, Owen's constant companion. This story is a reminder that even when all hope seems lost, a single, unexpected clue can change everything. If you find yourself captivated by this journey, consider subscribing to follow more stories of mystery and resolution. The world had shrunk to the size of his backyard. For 72 hours, Davis Hale had walked its perimeter, his eyes tracing the path from the back door to the sandbox, over and over, as if the sheer force of his will could rewind time. Each loop was a fresh torment. He'd see the ghost of Owen, his blonde hair bright in the afternoon sun, happily digging with his little green shovel. He'd see the stuffed giraffe, Jerry, propped up beside him. Then he'd blink, and it would all be gone again. The sandbox was empty, cordoned off with yellow police tape that fluttered mockingly in the breeze. The police had been kind but clinical. Detective Harding, a man with tired eyes who'd seen too much, had asked the same questions a dozen times. Was the gate locked, Mr. Hale? Did you see any unfamiliar cars? Was Owen ever out of your sight? Davis had answered until his voice was raw. Yes, the gate was always locked. No. No strange cars. And yes, for maybe 5 minutes. 5 minutes to use the bathroom. 5 minutes that had stretched into an eternity of self-blame. His wife, Clara, was a wreck. She moved through their house like a phantom, her face pale and drawn, clutching one of Owen's tiny sneakers to her chest. They barely spoke, their shared grief a chasm between them. The house, once filled with the happy noise of a toddler, was now suffocatingly silent. Volunteers had combed the woods behind their neighborhood. Police dogs had lost the scent at the end of their driveway. The news channels played Owen's smiling face on a loop, the word missing stamped in bold red letters below it. There were no witnesses, no ransom note, nothing. It was as if the earth had simply swallowed his son whole. Then came the call. It was Cora, the woman who had just moved in next door a few weeks ago. Her voice was shaky, breathless. Davis? You need to come over here. Right now. It's about Owen. Davis didn't remember hanging up the phone or running out the door. He was suddenly at the wooden fence that separated their properties, his heart hammering against his ribs. Cora stood there, her hand over her mouth, pointing to the base of the fence. Her beagle, a small dog named Buster, was wagging his tail proudly beside a freshly dug mound of dirt. And sticking out of that dirt, its long neck caked in mud, was Jerry the giraffe. Davis vaulted the fence in one clumsy motion, landing on his knees beside the hole. His hands trembled as he reached for the toy. It was wet and cold, but it was real. He pulled it free from the earth and clutched it to his chest, the smell of damp soil filling his nostrils. It was the first tangible piece of his son he had touched in 3 days. He dug it up from his side, Cora whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and pity. The hole started on my side of the fence. Davis looked down. She was right. The majority of the digging was in her yard, a deep trough that ran right up to the fence line. Someone had buried Jerry from the neighbor's property. The police arrived within minutes, their measured calm a stark contrast to the frantic hope surging through Davis. Detective Harding looked at the giraffe, then at the hole, and his tired eyes showed a flicker of something new. Interest. Who lived here before you? He asked Cora. Cora shook her head. I never met him. It was all through a real estate agent, an older man, I think. The agent said he was very private, moved out in a hurry. The police began their work. They photographed the hole, the fence, the toy. They took a statement from Cora, but Davis couldn't stand still. The discovery of the toy hadn't brought him peace. It had lit a fire under his despair. Owen wasn't just gone. Someone took him. And that someone had been living right next door. Harding told him to go home, to let them do their job. We'll find out who he is, Davis. We'll track him down. But Davis knew how these things worked. It would be a process. Warrants, records, databases. It would take time, and time was the one thing he didn't have. Back in his own house, clutching the muddy giraffe, Davis found Clara in Owen's room, folding and refolding the same small T-shirt. He showed her the toy. For the first time in days, a spark of life returned to her eyes, followed quickly by a fresh wave of tears. Who would do this, Davis? Who? That was the question, and Davis knew he couldn't wait for someone else to answer it. While the police followed procedure, he would follow his gut. He went back to Cora's. I know this is a lot to ask, he said, trying to keep his voice steady, but did the old owner leave anything behind? Any mail that might have come here by mistake? Cora hesitated for only a second before nodding. There were a few things. I stuck them in a drawer. She returned with a small stack of letters. Most were junk mail, but one was a final utility bill. On it was the name Silas Croft, and below that, a forwarding address. It wasn't a street address, but a P.O. box in a town called Harmony Creek, about a 2-hour drive away, nestled deep in the mountains. Detective Harding would call this reckless. Clara would call it crazy. But to Davis, it felt like the only sane thing to do. He went to his car, the utility bill with Silas Croft's name on it, feeling like the most important document in the world. He was going to Harmony Creek. He was going to find his son. The drive to Harmony Creek was a blur of highway and trees. Davis drove on pure adrenaline, his mind a whirlwind of terrifying possibilities. What kind of man steals a child? What would he find at the end of this road? He gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, the image of Owen's smiling face flashing in his mind's eye. He had to believe his son was okay. To think otherwise was to let the darkness win. Harmony Creek was less a town and more a handful of buildings clustered around a single crossroads. There was a gas station, a diner, and a small post office. Davis parked in front of the post office, his heart pounding. He walked inside, the utility bill in his hand. An older woman with a friendly face looked up from behind the counter. Can I help you? She asked. Davis cleared his throat. I'm looking for a man named Silas Croft. This is his P.O. box. He showed her the bill. She adjusted her glasses, her friendly expression tightening slightly. Silas? Sure, I know him. Doesn't come in often. A quiet fellow. Keeps to himself. Do you know where he lives? Davis pressed, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. I'm an old friend trying to get in touch. The postmistress looked at him, her gaze sharp and assessing. We're not supposed to give out addresses. Privacy rules. Davis's shoulders slumped. For a moment he thought this was it. Another dead end. He pulled out his phone and showed her the picture of Owen. His name is Owen, he said, his voice cracking. He's 3. He's my son. He's been missing for 3 days, and I have reason to believe this man, Silas, might know where he is. The woman's demeanor changed instantly. The professional mask fell away, replaced by a look of deep concern. She looked from the photo of Owen back to Davis's haunted face. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. He bought the old Miller place. It's about 5 miles up Ridge Road. It's isolated. You can't miss it. It's the last house before the road turns to gravel. Davis felt a surge of gratitude so intense it almost brought him to his knees. Thank you, he breathed. Thank you. Ridge Road was a winding, poorly maintained strip of asphalt that climbed steadily into the wooded hills. After 10 minutes of driving, he saw it. A small, run-down house set back from the road, half hidden by overgrown trees. A plume of smoke curled from its stone chimney. This was it. Davis pulled his car off the road, concealing it behind a thicket of pines a few hundred yards away. His hands were shaking now. He pulled out a pair of binoculars he kept in his glove compartment and focused on the house. The yard was a mess of weeds and rusted junk, but something caught his eye. Hanging from the low branch of an oak tree was a small, crudely made tire swing. It was new. The rope was clean, the tire free of moss. He scanned the windows of the house, his breath held tight in his chest, and then he saw it. A flicker of movement in a downstairs window. A small figure. A child. The binoculars shook in his hands as he tried to get a clearer look. The child moved away from the window, but for a split second, Davis had seen enough. The small frame, the flash of blonde hair. It was Owen. He was alive. An overwhelming mix of relief and terror washed over Davis. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers clumsy as he dialed 911. He gave the dispatcher the address, his voice a strained whisper. "My son is here. The man who took him is here." They told him to stay put, that officers were on their way, that he shouldn't engage. But as he looked at that house, at the place that held his entire world captive, he knew he couldn't wait. Every second felt like a lifetime. He had to get his son. He ended the call, got out of the car, and started moving toward the house, his every step a prayer. The woods were silent except for the crunch of his own footsteps on the dry leaves. Davis moved from tree to tree, his eyes locked on the small house. The front porch sagged, and the paint was peeling, but the windows were clean. It looked less like a monster's lair and more like a place forgotten by time. He reached the edge of the clearing and paused, his heart thudding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. What was he going to do? Kick down the door? He had no weapon, no plan other than the raw, paternal need to get to his child. He crept onto the porch, the old wood groaning under his weight. He tried the front doorknob. It was unlocked. Taking a deep, shaky breath, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was sparse and surprisingly tidy. A threadbare armchair sat before a small fireplace where a low fire crackled. The air smelled of wood smoke and something else. Soup. There was no sign of a struggle, no sense of violence. It was just quiet. Too quiet. "Owen?" he called out, his voice barely a whisper. From a room down a short hallway, he heard a small noise, a child's giggle. Davis moved toward the sound, his every muscle tensed. He peered into the room. It was a child's bedroom, but not Owen's. The furniture was old and wooden, the kind you'd see in an antique store. And on the floor, in the middle of a worn rug, sat Owen. He was pushing a small wooden car back and forth, seemingly content. He was safe. He was unharmed. The relief was so powerful, Davis's legs almost gave out. He leaned against the door frame, tears blurring his vision. He likes the old toys best. The voice came from behind him. Davis spun around. A man stood in the hallway. He was older, maybe in his late 60s, with gaunt features, sorrowful gray eyes, and thinning hair. He was holding a bowl of soup. This was Silas Croft. He didn't look like a monster. He looked frail, tired, and deeply sad. "What have you done?" Davis choked out, stepping in front of the doorway to shield Owen. Silas looked down at the bowl in his hands, then back at Davis. There was no malice in his eyes, only a profound and unsettling confusion. "I was keeping him safe," he said, his voice soft. "He was all alone in the yard. It's not safe for a boy to be alone." At that moment, Owen looked up. "Dada!" he cried out, his face breaking into a wide, beautiful smile as he scrambled to his feet and ran toward Davis. Davis swept his son up into his arms, burying his face in his soft hair, breathing in the scent of him. He held him so tightly, afraid that if he let go, this would all turn out to be a dream. "I had a boy once," Silas said quietly, still standing in the hall. "His name was Thomas. He would have been about your age," he said, looking at Davis. "My wife, Eleanor, there was an accident, a car crash a long time ago. They were both gone." He spoke the words simply, as if stating the weather. The story tumbled out of him in a disconnected stream. He'd moved next to Davis and Clara a year ago, seeking quiet. He'd watch Owen playing in the yard, and the boy's laughter was like a balm on his old, scarred heart. In his lonely, grief-stricken mind, Owen had started to become Thomas. The day he took him, he said he'd seen Owen alone, and a powerful, irrational panic had seized him. He believed Owen was in danger, that he had to protect him just as he had failed to protect his own son. He'd unlatched the gate, scooped up the surprised but not frightened child, and simply walked away. The wail of sirens grew louder, finally arriving. Davis held Owen tighter as police officers swarmed the house. They took Silas into custody gently, without a struggle. The man seemed to hardly notice them, his eyes still distant, lost in a past that had consumed his present. Detective Harding found Davis in the child's room. "We found his records," Harding said, his voice low. "He lost his wife and son 30 years ago. He's been in and out of psychiatric care ever since. He's not evil, Davis. He's just broken." The drive home was the opposite of the drive there. It was slow and peaceful. Owen was asleep in his car seat, his small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. In his lap, he clutched Jerry the giraffe, which Clara had meticulously cleaned. Davis kept glancing in the rearview mirror, reassuring himself that his son was really there, safe and sound. When they pulled into the driveway, Clara ran out the front door. The moment she saw Owen, she let out a sob of pure relief, and the three of them stood there on the lawn, a family made whole again. That night, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, they were all together in their own home. After they put Owen to bed, Davis went into the backyard. He looked at the sandbox, no longer a place of horror, but a simple plastic ring filled with sand. He walked to the police tape and, with a sense of finality, pulled it down. The nightmare was over. Their healing was just beginning. Silas Croft clearly committed a terrible crime, but his actions were driven by delusion and profound grief, not malice. It raises a difficult question. Where does justice end and compassion begin for someone who is not evil, but deeply unwell? If these kinds of real-life moral complexities interest you, be sure to explore our channel for more stories that go beyond the headlines. We're always here, waiting to share the next narrative.